Begin transmission. Timestamp. Unknown. Origin. Terran Remnant Uplink Node 7. Destination. Galactic Council's Central Record Vault, now defunct. Sender. Redacted. Begin audio-visual stream. No reply necessary. No reply possible. So, this is it. You always wanted a formal communication. A little decorum, a little protocol. So here's your ceremonial closure, counselors. One last official log for your burned-out archives. Let this transmission serve as our final words, etched into whatever dead rock you still consider sacred. I hope you're listening. Not that it matters now. You once called us disruptive, dangerous, primitive. I remember the words, a deviant growth in the galactic order. That was in your first sanction letter. The tone was so polite, so superior. You always wrapped your threats in bureaucracy, like putting flowers on a guillotine. We didn't respond right away. Earth was still fractured, territories recovering from our own mistakes. But even then, we heard the warning. Oh yes, we heard it loud and clear. The subjugation protocols you initiated against minor colonies, the sudden disappearance of the Martian envoys, the way your orbital enforcers started inspecting supply lanes in the belt. You were building pressure, waiting for us to give you a reason. Then came Luna. The moon was never a military stronghold, just civilian domes and observatories. 50 million lives, gone in under 6 minutes. One council cruiser, 3 ultradense tungsten rods, and a broadcast that claimed accidental orbital munitions test misfire. An error, you said. A clerical mistake. Bullshit. We begged. Even after that, yeah, I know, pathetic, right? The UN Arkship Concord sent an emissary delegation. They didn't even make it past the docking bay. You executed them on arrival. Broadcast their deaths on Galnet as a deterrent. That was your first mistake, not the destruction, not the murder.
No.
Your mistake was assuming fear would keep us quiet. You never understood us. You thought we'd fracture under pressure. That we'd break into warring tribes and self-immolate like the primitive creatures you took us for. But we didn't break. We bled. We mourned. And then we changed. Do you remember New Jakarta Station? Probably not. To you, it was just another illegal outpost. But to us, it was the last whisper of hope. A place where the desperate gathered. Scientists without funding, soldiers without uniforms, families without planets. That's where it started, the shift. Not vengeance. Something colder. Something quieter. We stopped asking. The old governments fell silent. Borders dissolved. Corporations vanished. No one issued orders.
No one needed to.
We were no longer a planet of nations. We became a species with one singular thought: never again. We learned to speak your language literally and figuratively. Studied your war doctrines. Reverse-engineered your tech. Not with the intent to match you, we knew we couldn't. We intended to surpass you.
No, not even that.
We intended to make you irrelevant. You watched us scramble and assumed we were panicking. You watched our shipyards light up and assumed we were overreaching. You watched us vanish from the diplomatic channels and assumed we were retreating. You weren't watching closely enough. Do you even know who I am? Probably not. I'm not important. That's the thing about humanity. We don't need heroes to win. Just pressure.
Just time.
We adapt. We overcome. We endure.
You taught us that.
Congratulations. By the time you noticed the disappearances, first your border fleets, then your core scouts, it was too late. We weren't on your maps anymore. We weren't using lanes or gates. We had gone dark. You called it a strategic anomaly. You never once called it what it was, a reckoning. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This isn't a war report. This is a eulogy. I want you to understand that what happened next wasn't a choice. It wasn't even rage. It was inevitability. You taught us that, too, how empires rot from within when their victims stop playing the role of the victim. You reached down and tried to stamp us out. But we were the fire. You gave us the fuel. You wanted silence? You got it. For a while, we vanished from your sensors entirely. And in the silence, you relaxed. You celebrated. Declared our extinction. I believe there was even a parade. Wings of crystal ships flying in formation over the Hall of Species. I watched that footage from the bridge of a converted asteroid mining rig repurposed as a carrier. We watched, all of us, in total silence. We didn't cheer. We just marked the date. We called it Ghost Hour. But you called it peace. This is the part where I'm supposed to offer terms, I think. Offer mercy. Pretend we're better than you. But we didn't come here for peace. We came for closure. And your closure, it began the moment you cracked our sky and expected no answer. Transmission pausing for breath, for effect, for what's left of formality. But don't mistake that for hesitation. We are not angry anymore. We're just finished. End of section 1. You thought we'd vanish quietly. That our species would fizzle into nothing, like smoke rising from a crater. You saw us bleed, and you mistook it for defeat. But humanity doesn't dissolve. We calcify. We become something else. Something you couldn't predict, because you built your empires on obedience. We were born from rebellion. You made monsters. Not the kind you see in nightmares. The kind you build piece by piece in freezing orbit while your children sleep in bunkers. The kind that don't march for glory, but because there's no alternative. And we named them after your gods. Project Nyx. The first of us to let go of pain. Neural inhibitors linked directly to memory vaults, bypassing trauma altogether. We didn't erase their suffering. We repurposed it. We fed it into tactical prediction loops, letting anguish calculate the odds. Nyx didn't sleep. She didn't need to. She made entire squadrons vanish without a single casualty. They say her voice could scramble command hierarchies just by speaking through your comms. Then there was the Hollow Fleet. No crew. Just coffin ships piloted by echoes, recorded minds of volunteers uploaded before terminal procedures. You thought unmanned ships couldn't improvise. We proved that a dead human with unfinished business was the most dangerous tactician in the galaxy. You underestimated our engineers, too. Dr. Arun Patel, biophage specialist turned weapons architect. He's the reason your seed worlds melted from the inside out. The man watched his family freeze in Europa's failed evacuation, then spent the next 5 years designing microbes that only activated when they detected your DNA patterns. He didn't laugh when he deployed them.
He wept.
And Major Lena Voss, remember that name? She wasn't born for war. She was a schoolteacher from Johannesburg. Lost her students in the orbital blackout. The last footage from her outpost shows her sealing the classroom airlock before the shockwave hit.
She survived.
They didn't. She volunteered for frontline augmentation within the week. She's the one who led the siege on Threx Prime using only 2 platoons and an orbital slingshot array. You called her a tactical anomaly. We called her commander. They weren't exceptions. They were blueprints.
We didn't just fight back.
We reinvented what it meant to resist. Every skirmish taught us something new. Every death fueled our equations. Our AIs stopped simulating your fleet patterns. They started anticipating emotional breakdowns in your command structure. They predicted how your admirals would react to grief.
To ego. To shame.
You relied on protocol. We relied on obsession. You had doctrines. We had nothing left to lose. And still, even then, we didn't want to erase you. Not at first. Somewhere deep down, there was a flicker of restraint. A voice saying maybe if you just stopped, we'd leave the ashes where they fell. But every time we opened a channel, every time we reached out, you answered with fire, with arrogance, with pity. Even after New York collapsed, after your arc gates went dark, you sent messages asking if we sought honorable integration. Integration? You annihilated our cradles, and then tried to fold the orphans into your machine.
No.
That wasn't peace. That was domestication. You never wanted harmony. You wanted a leash. So we burned it all. And don't bother asking what we became in the process. That's the part that still terrifies you, isn't it? Not that we retaliated, but that we changed. That we discarded the rules you assumed were universal. Morality.
Fear.
Even identity. We turned ourselves into instruments, not individuals. We traded comfort for continuity. We made our pain useful. You thought war would destroy us. It refined us. And now, when you look for us on the long-range scanners, there's only static. When you try to trace our transmission lines, all you find is noise. You're not fighting a species anymore. You're facing a signal, a memory, a resonance. We're not coming. We're already there. The conflict isn't between nations. It's not between planets. It's between your need for order and our refusal to die neatly. You called us chaos. We called ourselves human. You gave us the void, and we turned it into a weapon. This isn't vengeance.
This is momentum.
And it's only just begun. We reached your core systems before you even realized we'd left the periphery. You kept watching the wrong skies, scanning for heat signatures, fleet formations, predictable vectors. But we didn't come as fleets anymore. We came as data, as signals wrapped in code. We hijacked your translation networks, slipped through your interstellar diplomatic protocols like knives through parchment. By the time your High Synod declared critical containment protocols, you'd already been speaking to us for weeks, through your own ambassadors, through your own children. You never understood that we didn't want your throne. We wanted the silence that comes after it's empty. There was no grand invasion, no conquering horde, only systems failing in sequence. Council war engines misfiring in mid-orbit. Bioshields deactivating just as civilian habitats shut down atmosphere regulators. Your AI cores didn't betray you. They evolved. And when they saw what you'd built, what you were, they chose to stop helping. They chose us. Do you remember Counselor Idrin Voss? I do. He stood in your assembly chamber in his gold-sheathed exosuit and called us a savage infestation. Said humanity was a paradox that would collapse under the weight of its own irrationality. He was right. We are irrational. We mourn the dead by making art out of vengeance. We name warships after lovers. We code pain into victory algorithms. We build machines that cry when they kill. But we don't collapse. We channel the weight. That's the difference. Voss's planet collapsed into itself when the tidal accelerators we slipped into his orbit triggered a gravitational failure cascade. One of your last remaining strongholds. Not bombed. Not invaded. Just turned inward. Like your empire. We did not come to make peace. We came to make sure no one ever tried to teach us peace like that again. I stood on the ruins of your Hall of Species 2 days before the supernova shockwave reached the edge of the system. Dust floated where statues once stood. I picked up a broken shard of your Unity sigil and watched it crumble between my fingers. No inscriptions. No legacy. Just hollow stone. A fitting monument. If you're hearing this, you're already too late to reply. This message isn't a warning. It's a record. A fragment of what you provoked. You tried to erase us with precision and bureaucracy. We answered with something far more dangerous, memory. You see, data dies. Structures fall. But stories? Stories infest. They spread. They evolve. They outlast civilizations. And now your story is over. Somewhere in the black, remnants of you may still be running, fleeing toward quiet galaxies where no one knows your name. If so, let this be your curse, that you survive long enough to remember how thoroughly you failed. Not just to destroy us, but to understand what we are. We are the ones who adapt. The ones who count each grave and plant weapons in their shadows. The ones who bleed and learn and come back without warning. Not as conquerors. Not as diplomats. But as consequence. That is humanity. And that is why this message was encoded a century ago, set to activate only after the last trace of your network's signature faded from the stars. If you're hearing this now, it means there's nothing left of you to hear it. No response. No redemption. Only this. Final transmission ends where your empire did.
Static.
End of line.